I'm watching the end of the game. You just mentioned Draymond Green fouling out. And the graphic comes across the screen that Draymond Green's fouled out in 3 of 5 final games. Last player to have such a thing happen during the NBA Finals, it was Dale Davis of the 2000 Indiana Pacers. You mentioned that stat. Turning to Mark Jackson, I don't know if you did or not, but Mark had a big problem with it. You called those Pacers a dirty team. And
well, when you're coaching a team of choir boys like we were in New York at that time, you take offense when the big bad bullies of the block, the Indiana Pacers, are always pushing, shoving, grabbing, holding, and, you know, like we followed the rules and we followed the spirit of the rules.
Yes,
and
sir.
Mark Jackson's Pacer team, you know, they were nasty, and, you know, we tried to be above that, but, you know, sometimes we couldn't hold our tempers.
I got to tell you, Jeff, as a Knick fan, remembering those times, I was applauding from my front row seat last night when you said that. Laugh out loud. And then
the Davis brothers were overly physical, picking on Charles Oakley, and and I didn't appreciate it. You know, I didn't appreciate it.
I loved it. You doubled it when you said it, and then Mark Jackson had a problem with it, and then the fact that you doubled down by throwing Antonio Davis onto the table in the mix as well at the same time. I was laughing my ass off. That was great. Just great television.
Well, I'm glad I gave you some moments of levity, Rich, because I do remember those Pacer teams so fondly. Seriously, like just the Davises and Reggie and McKee. They competed so hard and were coached brilliantly by Larry Brown, and so it was good times.
Absolutely, and that because it does kind of dovetail into the conversation you hear, certainly on the family of networks at the Worldwide Leader, about different eras and whether the current era would get, their, asses handed to them by the, aught Pacers. And I'm wondering, what do you think of that conversation, Jeff, as to whether the players today are, it's a softer league in a way in the NBA right now? Jeff?
Well, first of all, I misspoke. I said Larry Brown. That was in the 94s. That was Larry Bird.
Yes, correct.
Myself.
Yes, sir.
Larry Legend. But I think this, I'm looking out, and TNT's doing a pregame show from right in front of where we broadcast before we go on.
Right.
And I see Isaiah Thomas, right? And Isaiah Thomas was like my first year in the NBA in, I think it was 89-90. We played the Knicks. Stu Jackson was the head coach. We played them in the second round of the playoffs after beating the Boston Celtics in a Game 5 deciding game at Boston Garden. And he was absolutely murder. He was so good. But the game was so physical. And remember, they had Dennis Rodman as their starting three, I believe, at that time.
Right.
They had no shooting on the floor. And the guy still got wherever he wanted. So you take a guy like Isaiah Thomas, and you put him into the non-hand check era and the 5-out era and the amazing skill that our players have now, and you put shooting around him, I guarantee you he'd be, at his prime, a top 5 player now, right? So great players like Thomas, who are these great competitors, they could play any time. But I really don't have a lot of, an appetite for comparing and contrasting eras. To me, comparison is the thief of joy, because whatever you say, someone is going to feel diminished. And I don't have that, necessity, but I know this. The best teams I ever coached or I ever was an assistant coach of, I believe could play in any era because they had versatility, they could score, they could guard, and they could adapt. And if you can adapt to different rules and different eras, like Patrick Ewing, he was dominant then, he'd be dominant now. You say how he's going to guard the pick and roll, I say you didn't watch him in his prime, because he could guard, he could contain Stockton, he could contain Isaiah to the extent that anybody could. some of the greatest point guards to ever play. So I think greatness can transcend eras, but I just don't have, it in me to try to diminish some era to prop up another.